right, let's move.
Heute zijn we alles afgemaakt. Heute moet diegenen die niet konden en snappen, die worden als slaven meegenomen.
Wat is dat gebeurd?
Werd aan die andere kant van de Louvre.
Dinah, we have to go.
We need to help these people.
We have to stay on mission. The next safe crossing is at least a day away. What are we waiting for?
We cannot leave without helping them. These people are dying. They've nothing to eat and in the village enslaved, she said.
I understand that.
Women,
we need
children.
to make our next position by sunset.
How can you say that? What is the matter with you?
This is no man's land, Diana. It means no man can cross it, all right? This battalion has been here for nearly a year, and they barely gained an inch. All right, because on the other side, there are a bunch of Germans pointing machine guns at every square inch of this place. This is not something you can cross. It's not possible.
So what? So we do nothing?
No, we are doing something. We are. We can't save everyone in this war. This is not what we came here to do.
No. But it's what I'm going to do.
Taking all the fire, let's go! 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 Down! Strike there! Strike there!
I have no point for that. I just wanted to watch Wonder Woman. No, I'm just kidding. As you're watching that, you probably just saw a movie, or you saw a superhero, or you saw something. But when I watched that, to me, it's a picture of the church. Wonder Woman in that scene is the representation of a church. And in the very beginning of that scene, you saw a bunch of people telling her, like, you know, you can't go across. You can't do these things. And he uses that phrase, it's impossible. You just can't do these things. And he said, well, we got to help the people. Why are we not helping the people? And we come back and we say, what? But we are helping the people. We are helping. Really? We haven't gained an inch in over a year? but we're helping. And then she decides to do the impossible. She steps out where she's not supposed to step out. And she runs towards the enemy, realizing, knowing full well that they can't touch her. And when the church decides to move, when the church decides to push forward into something, the enemy gets mad and he starts firing. In the scriptures it says that he slings those fiery arrows at us. And he starts slinging it. And all of a sudden, here's what you need to recognize. The church gets the attack. The church does. The church gets the attack. The church takes the full force of society. The church takes the full force of what the enemy wants to throw at it. And if you guys are wondering in your life, like, oh, I can't say this or I can't say that, and I always get attacked if I say something on social media about Jesus or that type of stuff, it's because of this moment right here. The church gets the full force of the enemy's attack. But as the church is getting the full force of the enemy's attacks, it allows the people to move. Did you guys catch that? It allows the people to move forward. It allows the people to take ground, not just in their lives, but in their spiritual lives as well. Because when the church decides to move, there's nothing that can stop it. And you thought you were watching Wonder Woman. And I had this thought in my mind as we're coming up to the new year. I was thinking about this moment. I was like, God, what do we do as a church? I feel like that moment when she's in the trench and she's sitting there saying, we've got to help, we've got to help. And there's always those people like, you know, and they're good. They're well-mannered. They have good intentions. They're like, well, you are making a difference. And it's like, but I don't see the change. Did that make sense? I feel like there needs to be a step of faith. There needs to be something that moves us forward. And in your life, I'm wondering if that's the same for you. That in your life, I wonder if church, I wonder if prayer, reading the scriptures, evangelizing to your friends and family has maybe gotten bored or boring. And you feel like, even though you keep doing it, and it's a habit of yours, and you keep doing it, maybe you feel like you're not gaining any ground. And there needs to be that extra step, that leap of faith in your walk with God. Now, I don't know what that is, because it's all personal to you. Does that make sense? Everything's personal, so I can't sit here and be like, we're doing this, and you got to do this, because then that would be our vision, that would be my vision, and that's not necessarily your vision, because God has given you something specific that He wants you to do. Did that make sense? Yeah. And so here's what I started thinking. I said, God, what if I could share anything today about this moving forward, about taking that leap of faith, about taking that next step? God, what is it that I could share? And the one phrase that just kept coming to mind was this: make it count. Make it count. I was like, okay, God, make what count? And that's what I said. I said, God, what do you want? Make it count. And I go, okay, make what count? The church, my job, the family. Make it count. And then He gave me this. Boom. On the next part. Yeah, woo. That's where I'm going today. This number. I forgot I put that in there. 29,200. Which is a random number. But if you don't know what that number is, that is the number of days that an average person has in their lifetime. You only have 29,200 days if you live to be 80 years old. So then I started researching this. I thought it was interesting. The next one is this. You have 8,516 days. That's 23 years, and that's of sleep. If you live to be 80 years old, you will sleep for 23 years of your life. Oh, by the way, and that's only if you get 7 hours of sleep a day. Some of you get more. And some of you get less. Right? I wanted to keep going because I was like, God, if we only have this many days, I want to see where do we land in all of this. So I found this to be absolutely fascinating. There's 1,338 days in a lifetime. That's 3.5 years you spend eating. That is a year. That is a 3.5 years of you just sitting down and putting food in your mouth. I found that to be absolutely fascinating. So I kept going, and I was like, okay, what else do we have? We have 548 days. That's a year and a half that you use just going to the bathroom. That's not taking a shower, and that's not getting ready. This is just going. In an average lifetime, you'll spend a year and a half on the toilet. All right, so the next thing that I thought was fascinating is 1,581 days. That is 4 years you will spend just driving in a car on average. 4 years. And then if you keep going, there's another one, 585 days, that is a year and a half, you will spend just in a classroom alone. Just in a classroom. If you go to college, add another year. This does not include your homework. This does not include anything extra. This is literally just sitting in the classroom by the laws of the state. And then if you have 6 days and whatever, you know what I'm saying? But average is this. Everybody with me on that one? Goes on, found a couple more. 4,380 days, that is 12 years developing a cognitive thought process. You will spend the first 12 years of your life, 0 to 12, and that is the 12 years old is usually the age that you can start making decisions on your own. It's a cognitive thought process. Did that make sense? Now some of you are saying, that is not true. But around the world it really is. There are 12-year-olds that take care of their brothers and sisters and they have no parents. They have a job and they will go. Did you know in the scriptures back in the ancient days, they would get married at the age of 12, 13, and 14 years old. This was the normal thing. Now our society nowadays doesn't say 12, they say 18. And then if you keep going, now they're saying not even 18, it's like 25. But at 12 years old, we have the idea that we can actually finally start, we've learned enough in life to sustain ourselves. Does that make sense? A 12-year-old is not going to be like, man, I really wish I could find food. They're going to find food. They have a cognitive response to that. Does that make sense? Everybody with me on that one? The last one I found I thought was very interesting. 3,814 days. It's 10.5 years you will spend just working at your job. And that is only if you work 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, 40-hour work week. If you work more than that, that rises up. They say the average, the most of the average in the United States is actually almost double that of somebody actually working. Because they have 2 jobs. They don't work 8 hours, they work 12-hour days. And they work not 5 days a week, they start working 6 to 7 days a week just to make ends meet. And I started thinking about it. And now these things, by the way, if you guys cared, this is all your normal stuff. You can't get away from any of this. I mean, you have to eat and sleep and go. You know what I mean? Like, especially if you're eating, you got to. Like, this is part of the process. And if you're and now if you have to go anywhere, like drive anywhere, you're there. This is life. There's no getting out of this. And so the next number came to me was this. You have 8,760 days. You have 24 years of free time. You know the one thing that's not in there, I didn't say chasing your kids around. Having kids. On average, you get 24 years of your life to do what you got to do. Make it count. And then God gave me another number I thought was very interesting, 1,440. Anybody know what this is? This is the amount of minutes you have in a day. So I decided to break down everybody's day just by eating, drinking, and all that kind of stuff. You have 1,440 minutes in a day. You spend 480 of those minutes sleeping. 67 minutes you spend eating. 480 minutes you will spend working or at school. You have to spend 60 minutes driving, and you will spend 30 minutes in the bathroom. Which means you have Ta-da! 323 minutes left in your day. You have about 5 hours of free time. And that is if you hit the average. Most people spend more time in a car than an hour a day. Most people spend more time in a bathroom in a day. Most people will spend less time eating in a day. And then some people spend more time sleeping in a day. But the reality is you will have about 4 to 5 hours of your life, if not 3 to 5 hours, in a single day. And the question becomes that the Lord is asking me to ask you today is, how do you make it count? What are you doing? See, the way that the enemy has it in our lives right now is the enemy wants us to get tired. The enemy wants to put us down. The enemy wants us to be in a state where we look at ourselves and say, I can't do anything else. And what happens is time becomes our God. And when time starts to become our God, we look at time to say what we can and cannot do. We do the same thing with our finances. Finances sometimes become our God because we look at our finances and say what we can and cannot do. Instead of looking at God himself and saying, what are you calling me to do today? If I'm going to move forward in my walk with Christ, if I'm going to move forward as the church, if we're going to be Wonder Woman in this case, and we are going to push forward because we're tired of the mundane, we're tired of the enemy shooting and us just taking cover. If we're ready to step out and say, I want to move, then the question becomes, what are you going to be doing with your day? How are you going to make it count? I started thinking about all these things and started thinking about how, like, what are there places in the Bible that God made it count and all these different things. And I went back to Genesis because I find this to be fascinating. Genesis is always just fascinating to me. I don't know if it is to you, but it is to me. It's the beginning of everything. And I don't know if you know this, but when God created everything, he said it was good. As a matter of fact, it was great. When he made you, it was like amazing. He looked at you and was like, yeah, that just happened. Right? That's literally what it says. It says he made everything, and when he made everything, he said it was good. But then he says, I'm going to make something else. And when he makes you, when he takes the dust of the earth and he gives you life, then he says it is great. You make things great. And then all of a sudden, we went wayward. We stopped listening to God. We started listening to all the outside sources. You know those things that say, you can't go out there. You can't do that. It's impossible, these things. And man got so far away from God. They couldn't recognize his voice. They wouldn't go by his rules. And man started hating and killing and hurting each other. To such an nth degree, if you will, that God said, I need to repent. He says, I am in Genesis chapter 5, he literally says, I am sorry. I repent for the way that the things have been made. Now, he's not sad that he made you. When the word repent literally means to change my mind. So he literally says, I'm going to do this in a different way. At this time, this is what I find so fascinating. At this time, there were no seasons. There were no seasons on the earth. It actually says that there was actually no rain on the earth at this time. What would happen is that in order to water the fields, it says that there was water that bubbled up from underneath the ground, and there was a mist every morning that laid on the ground like a blanket that would literally water the fields and do all those different types of things and give them actual water. It says there was no season. It was perfect year round. And then the floods hit. Because remember, he's changing the way that he's doing things. He's going to do a new thing. He's going to create something absolutely new. And in order to do that, he has to start with a clean slate, if you will. And so he takes a righteous family, and you know him as Noah. And he builds this ark. And let's just be real, it was the impossible. You're building a gigantic boat in the middle of a desert. You think he heard the word crazy a few times? Insanity? Stupid? You think those were words that he probably heard? Absolutely. Until the rain started to fall. And he couldn't do nothing. Now, everybody thinks of this story like, I have the weird look at Noah's Ark because when God shuts him in, it says that God literally takes his hand and God's the one that pulls the ark shut. And I wonder the screams, the cries that he heard of all the people trying to bang on the boat to get in when they realized the floods were happening. And Noah had to shut it off. Sorry, that was a side note. But isn't that like, if you think about it, you know, we have this like, oh, there's rainbows and there's a bunch of animals, yay! And I'm like, no, that was probably a really bad time. They probably had to huddle together as a family and rely on each other to get through those dark times. To hear those people screaming, let us on, let us on. Does that make sense? But God had to do the impossible thing. But here's what happened after the floods. This is what's recorded in Genesis chapter 8. In Genesis chapter 8, it actually says, I love this, it says there's seasons now. Before Genesis 8, before the floods, it was one season. It was spring pretty much. Everything grew, everything was amazing, everything was awesome. After the floods, it says that there are seasons now. What does that mean? That means we're going to go through things. There's going to be extreme heat, extreme cold, right? There's going to be a fall, a winter, a spring, and a summer. And if you guys don't know scientifically how that works, it means that our planet does this. Wah! As it spins. Right? And so we get closer and farther away, and this is how it works. And it says that all of a sudden, we have seasons. I think God did that on purpose. Remember, we're changing the way. It's not just going to be the same old thing anymore. You're going to go through seasons. You're going to go through ups and you're going to go through downs. Why? So that you can understand what good looks like and what bad really looks like. You're going to go through everything. You're going to go through gain. You're going to go through loss. You're going to go through all of these things. But the one thing has to remain the same. Him. You have to look at Him. He's the only way. And I got this account from 2 Kings chapter 7. In 2 Kings chapter 7, the Syrian army has like Israel surrounded. They're done, and they cut off all food sources. They cut off all water. They've cut off everything. And the king doesn't know what to do. And he feels like he's just been abandoned. And Elijah, the prophet at the time, is telling him, you need to stay focused on God. God will provide. And the king finally sends the messenger to Elijah, and he says, in Craig paraphrased version, he says, go pound sand, Elijah. The Lord has forgotten us, and I'm tired of waiting on the Lord. How many of us have been there? How many of us have sat in that spot where we said, I'm tired of waiting on you, Lord. I'm going to do my thing. And Elijah says, whoa, time out. By this day tomorrow, you will have a feast. We've been in a famine for like years now. We have no food. We are literally, we are starving to death. We are literally eating rocks. And you're telling me by this time tomorrow, we are going to be feasting? Elijah, you've gone off your rocker. And there are these 4 lepers. These 4 guys that were outcast. They would sit outside towns and they would beg for money. They would beg for food because they weren't allowed to go inside. And that's the only way that they could live. And these 4 guys got together and they said, man, it's bad times right now. I thought having a disease was bad, but this is worse. And they said, well, if we go into the town to try to get money, we're going to be killed because we're not allowed to enter into the town because we're lepers. But if we stay out here, we're going to die because we don't have any food. So these 4 lepers decide, hey, what if we didn't just beg here with our people? What if we went to the Syrians, to their camp, and beg for food outside of their camp? I mean, the worst that's going to happen is we go inside our village, we die, we stay out here, we die, we go to the Syrians and they kill us, we die. That's called the end of your rope. That's called the bottom of the barrel. When death is the only thing that you can foresee and the only thing that's coming into the future, then you have to do something. And they said, that's it, we're just going to try anything we possibly can. And so they went over to the Syrian army. And as they walked over to the Syrian army camp, they couldn't find anybody to talk to. They were literally looking around. They were walking into tents. They were looking at everything. The whole camp is deserted. But all the donkeys were still there. All the horses were still there. All the weapons were still there. And guess what? All the food was still there. But not one Syrian was there for anything. Every single person was gone. So the lepers went into the food tent for all the rations and they ate everything. And then they just started walking around the town, and they just started picking up like all this gold and silver, and they just started like filling their pockets, and they got so full of food, and they got their pockets so full of gold, they go, we can't carry anymore. What are we going to do? They're like, you know what? Let's not be selfish. Let's go save our town. Let's go tell the king, hey, the Syrians are gone. So you know, and so the way the story plays out is they go. The 4 lepers go to have a conversation with the king, which, if you're a leper, does not happen. And they said, hey, look, we were just at the Syrian camp. Nobody's there. And the king goes, oh, that's stupid. They have to be there. They're going to kill us. They're like, no, go look. Nobody's there. They send a scout there, and there's nobody's there. You want to know why? Because God had them all have the same dream that night. That night, they had this dream of chariots and horses. They had a dream that the Egyptians were surrounding them, and they heard thousands upon thousands of people, and they got so scared, they all woke up and they ran away. That's why it's deserted. By that time, that day, when Israel got there and they started feasting, the word of the Lord came true. By this time tomorrow, you will be feasting. You guys with me on this one? Why am I sharing that? We have a God that does the impossible. But our job is to kind of make sure that we are focusing on Him and not trying to do our own thing. When we try to do our own thing, we get into trouble. And my question still becomes, in your day, in your life, how are you making it count? Is it by your own will that you're trying to do something? Maybe you're sitting here so hard and you're trying so hard to get a job and you're trying to do this whole thing and you're going and you're doing all these things, but the one thing you forgot is to talk to God about it. The one thing is you're sitting there and you're telling God, and here's the thing, you ready? Did you hear what I said? You're telling God, God, I need this, and God, I need that, and God, I, and God's sitting up and going, you ain't need to know that. But if you ask me what you need, maybe I'll share with you what it is. And then what happens is we get caught in this little bit of a trap. And I call it the wishing trap. Okay? We start wishing for a bunch of things. See, there's a difference between wishing and hoping. And we need to understand that. See, wishing is defined by this. Wishing is an expressed strong desire or for something that is unlikely attainable. Want something that cannot or probably will not happen. That's a wish. I wish that when I walk out these doors, there's a red bow on a nice brand new Corvette ZR6, whatever. That's a wish. That's unattainable. That's not going to happen. Did that make sense? Why? Because there's no feet work to that. There's nothing to that. It's just a wish. And Disney has made a killing on you wishing for things that they know are unattainable. So they keep you in a cycle of just wishing and wishing and wishing. And you sit there and you're in your wishing state and you're like, oh. And all of a sudden you get caught up in this. And then you go, and then what you do is you pretend like God is a genie. Now you mix the wishing with the Bible, and all of a sudden you expect that if you pray and rub the Bible hard enough or read the Bible hard enough, that He's going to give you the wish. The problem is that's not how God works. See, God's not in the wishing business, He's in the hope business. And here's what hope means. Hope is an expression of expectation and desire for a certain thing that is going to take place or happen. A wish, it ain't happening. A hope, or to hope, means that it is going to happen and you are just waiting in anticipation for it to happen. If you are sitting here hoping on a wish, then you don't understand the terms. You don't understand how God works. See, what God says in the scriptures is He gives you a promise. And He says, have hope in the promise. Why? Because when God promises something, He fulfills His word. Amen? Amen. And if He fulfills His word, that means it's going to happen. 2 Kings, I'm going to feed you. By this time tomorrow, you're going to be feasting. I'm tired of waiting for you, God. I'm going to do my own thing. And if they would have walked away, they would have never feasted. Does that make sense? You have to sit back and say, look, God has told me this. God has promised me these things in my life, and therefore I'm going to sit in hope, which is anticipation, that these things are going to happen in my life. I'm not going to wish anymore. I'm tired of wishing, because wishing usually is my desires. Wishing is usually me. My desire is this. God, make your desire my desire, and let's make this happen. Right? Most of us, God, my desire or my wish is to win the lottery. Make that your plan. Thinking that money is going to solve your problems when the reality is it ain't. I was having this conversation with my wife the other day. I was like, man, in all honesty, if you had all the money in the world, what would you do? I said, well, we'd buy a house, we'd do this, and then everybody has like their things. We'd buy, but then all of a sudden you're going to buy enough. And then what? And then the question becomes, why aren't you just living what you want to live out now? Why is the money stopping you? You're like, well, Craig, like I said I'd buy a house and this type of stuff. But you have a house. You have something over your head. So what is the root desire? What is that root hope, the root of hope that you have? What is God calling you to do? And if He's calling you to do something, which we know that He is, then why are we not obtaining it? Why are we not going after it? Because we're too busy not hoping in what the Lord has said. We're too busy wishing in what we want. And we need to stop that. We need to get into a place, especially in 2019, to say, God, I'm all about you now. I want to hope in what you have for me. What are you saying for me? And this is where prayer comes into play. What does your prayer life look like? And here's the thing, is I think the church has screwed up prayer life so much that it's weird. Like, I was told this when I was growing up, and I don't know if you were, and I'm not telling you to do this, but it's like, you need to pray for like 2 hours a day. And what does prayer look like for 2 hours a day? Oh, you need to like sit down and just focus on the Lord. I don't know if you guys ever tried that, but I usually fall asleep. I gotta focus on the Lord. And then you have like that worship music playing, like it's nice, sweet, and soft, and it's like, it's like, dude, that's the perfect fall asleep music. Like, you know what I mean? Like, and you get in. Now here's the thing. This is what you were told. You gotta make it a habit. You gotta make it a habit. You gotta do this. You gotta do this. And I'm sitting there. I'm like, I don't even know what to talk about for 2 hours. Because we don't understand what prayer truly is. Prayer is literally just a conversation between you and God. You know what changed my prayer life completely? I stopped telling God what I wanted, and I started asking how He was doing. And then I listened. And He would say the weirdest things. Like, Craig, you talk to God? Absolutely I do. You know why? Because He talks to His people. He really does. And all you have to do is say, God, and listen, this is the first thing that ever happened to me when I changed my prayer life. I said, God, how are you today? That was literally my prayer. God, how are you today? And all of a sudden I started thinking about China. And I was like, I'm ADD. I don't know, like China, right? So I was like, okay. I was like, so the first thing I thought of was, well, what's going on in China? I literally turned on like the news, or this was the internet back in the day, which AOL, not Google. I literally researched what's going on in China. And it turned out China was going through like almost like a civil type of war. There was like this thing going on and all these things. And I was like, God, that's where your heart is right now. That's why you told me China. You are literally concerned about what's going on in China. And it was at that time that they were starting these regimes to really kind of like get rid of all Christianity and all God out of the entire country. I couldn't have guessed that. So I was like, God, you care about China? And He's like, well, yeah. So I started praying for China. Next day, God, how are you today? What's going on with you? Where's your heart today? And He would just share these things with me. And my prayer life no longer was hey, God, this is what I wish. This is what I want. This is me. This. My prayer life now became, God, what are you doing? And can I help you in any way? And that is what I pray for you guys in 2019. Is that your prayer life would radically change. And if you have a good prayer life, I still pray that it would radically change for the better. Because you can always get better. There's always more things that God can add. We go from glory to glory to glory. And so in 2019, the question becomes, how are you going to make it count? How are you going to make this year count? How are you going to make each day count? God's given you seasons, and it's not about, oh, I'm in a bad season, a good season. I can still look at God and say, you are the same today as you were yesterday and you are tomorrow. And you have a plan and a purpose for my life, and I'm going to stick with it. And you know what? Whoever brings me the news, because doesn't God use the most random people to bring good news? The 4 lepers were the ones that saved an entire nation pretty much. How did they do it? They just went. They took a leap of faith. And when they did, they saw fruit from it. And this is what I asked for you for this year. So here's what we do at our church. This is the moment, if you can, go ahead, staff, if wherever you're at, you can go ahead and, we're going to pass out a piece of paper to you and an envelope. And that piece of paper, on one side, it is going to say, my desires for 2019. Okay? My desires for 2019. And here's what we want you to do. After hearing all of this, I want you to write down, how are you going to make it count in 2019? Just write it down. Just pray through it, write it down. And as you start writing it down, just let the Lord kind of speak to you. And no, you're not going to have a ton of time, but we're going to take a good 10, 15 minutes and write it down. Now, once you're done writing it down, on the back of the paper, it says, my prayer for you. What I want you to do is I want you to find somebody that does not know you. I want you to hand them the letter. And their job is to write a prayer for you. Does that make sense? It's a blessing. Now here's the thing. Your job is not to read the other side. Did that make sense? Don't read the other side. That's not the fun in it is not knowing what they wrote. Your job is to sit down and say, God, what are you asking me for? Now here's the thing. Ready for this? This is why I say do it to somebody you don't know. Okay? Because if you're absolutely wrong, nobody will know who you are. But you just write down a blessing for them, or you say, God, what do you want them to know in 2019? And I want you to write down that prayer. It doesn't have to be very long. It can be 2 sentences long. It can be 3 sentences long. You don't have to write a novel. It's okay. Just whatever. And here's the thing. For those of you that are like me, that don't know how to spell, it's okay. It's okay. This is not going to be graded. This is not a grading paper. So here's what you're going to do. Front, write down my desires for 2019. Okay? How are you going to make it count? On the back, you're going to hand it to somebody that you preferably don't know, and then they are going to write out a prayer for you. Now, if you're new here and you're like, well, Craig, I don't know how to pray. It's okay. Just do your best. That's all we're asking. This is that leap of faith. This is that moving forward that we are talking about. If you need a pen, you can raise your hand. We got tons of pens and pencils and all that kind of stuff. And so we're going to do this. But before we get into it, this is what the Lord told us for this year. The Lord shared with us Isaiah 43. This is what he said to us. And I want to share this. We'll go back. Yes. Thus says the Lord, who makes a way in the sea, a path in the mighty waters, who brings forth chariot and horses, army and warrior. They lie down, they cannot rise. They are extinguished, quenched like a wick. Remember not the former things, nor consider the things of old. Behold, I am doing a new thing. Now it springs forth. Do you not perceive it? I will make a way in the wilderness and the rivers and in the deserts. The wild beasts will honor me, the jackals and the ostriches, for I give water in the wilderness, rivers in the desert to give drink to my chosen people, the people whom I formed for myself, that they might declare my praise. What is all that? God is saying this, I am going to provide in 2019. It doesn't matter what desert you're in. It doesn't matter what tragedies you're in. You have to remember, I will provide. And you have to do this. You have to let go of the old. Because when you let go of the old, you can start doing the new. Amen? So with that said, go ahead and start writing. We're going to put on some music. Write what you need to write down. And then I will come back on. And if you have not switched your papers at that time, I'm going to ask you to switch your papers in a few moments.